I always thought I knew what family meant. Love, trust, unconditional support. But life has a way of shattering our illusions, doesn't it? My name is Amy, and this is the story of how my family fell apart, and how I found the strength to pick up the pieces. It was a crisp autumn evening when my world began to crumble. I remember the chill in the air as I walked home from class, my breath forming little clouds in front of me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from my mom. "Come home right away. It's about Sarah." My heart sank. Sarah, my little sister, had been sick on and off for months, but the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. I quickened my pace, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. When I burst through the front door of our modest suburban home, I found my mom and Sarah sitting on the couch, both of their faces streaked with tears. The silence was deafening. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she spoke. "It's Sarah's kidneys. They're failing. She needs a transplant." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. Sarah, my baby sister, the one I'd sworn to protect since the day she was born. How could this be happening to her? I looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time in months. Her usually rosy cheeks were pale, her eyes sunken and rimmed with dark circles. How had I not noticed how sick she'd become? What do we do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom's eyes met mine, and I saw a desperation there that I'd never seen before. "We need to find a donor," she said, "and quickly." Little did I know that those words would set in motion a chain of events that would tear our family apart and force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. As the days turned into weeks, our lives revolved around Sarah's illness. Doctors' appointments, tests, and endless discussions about treatment options consumed us. I tried to be there for her as much as I could, but between my classes and my part-time job, I felt like I was always playing catch-up. One night, as I sat at my desk trying to focus on a paper that was due the next day, I heard raised voices coming from downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear what was going on. "We have to tell her, Linda." My dad's voice, gruff and tired. "She has a right to know." "No," Mom's voice sharp and panicked. "It would destroy her. We can't risk it, not now." "Risk what?" I whispered to myself, my heart pounding. But before I could hear any more, Sarah's bedroom door opened, and I quickly retreated to my room. Whatever they were arguing about, I had a sinking feeling it involved me. The next morning, as I stumbled into the kitchen for coffee, Mom cornered me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Amy," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk about something important." I braced myself, expecting the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "We need you to get tested," Mom said, "to see if you're a match for Sarah's kidney transplant." I blinked, trying to process her words. "Of course," I said automatically. "I'll do whatever it takes to help Sarah." But as the words left my mouth, I felt a strange sense of unease. Why hadn't they asked me sooner? And what were they arguing about last night? Little did I know, those questions would lead me down a path that would change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. The next few weeks were a blur of tests, consultations, and agonizing waiting. I tried to stay positive for Sarah's sake, but the strain was starting to show on all of us. Dad threw himself into work, barely home except to sleep. Mom hovered over Sarah constantly, leaving me feeling more and more like an afterthought. It was during one of these tense evenings that the bomb finally dropped. I was in the kitchen, half-heartedly picking at a bowl of cereal, when Mom burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "Amy," she exclaimed, "the results are in. You're a match." For a moment, relief washed over me. I could help Sarah. I could save my little sister. But then I saw the look in Mom's eyes, a mixture of hope and something else. Desperation. Guilt. That's great, I stammered. When do we schedule the surgery? Mom's smile faltered slightly. Well, there's still some paperwork to fill out, and we need to discuss the risks. As she rambled on, about medical jargon, I felt a creeping sense of dread. Something wasn't right. The way Mom was avoiding my gaze, the tremor in her voice, it all pointed to a truth she wasn't telling me. Mom, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. What aren't you telling me? She froze, her eyes widening with panic. And in that moment I knew, whatever secret they'd been keeping, whatever they'd been arguing about, it was about to come out. I don't know what you mean, Mom stammered, but her face betrayed her. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I heard you and Dad arguing. What's going on? For a long moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, Mom sank into a chair at the table. Amy, she began, her voice trembling, there's something you need to know. Something we should have told you a long time ago. As I sat across from her, my heart pounding in my chest, I had no idea that the next words out of her mouth would shatter my world forever. Sarah isn't your full sister, Mom said, her words coming out in a rush. We have different fathers. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself as the implications of her words sank in. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mom's eyes filled with tears. It was before I met your father. I made a mistake, but I loved you both so much. And your dad. He agreed to raise Sarah as his own. The pieces started to fall into place. The arguments I'd overheard, the guilty looks, the hesitation about the transplant. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. So Dad isn't Sarah's biological father? I asked, my mind reeling. Mom nodded, unable to meet my gaze. That's why we were so worried about the transplant. We didn't know if you'd be a match, given that you're only half-sisters. Half-sisters. The words echoed in my head, mocking everything I thought I knew about my family. About myself. How could you keep this from us? I demanded, anger rising to replace the shock. All these years, all the lies. We thought it was for the best, Mom pleaded. We didn't want either of you to feel different or unloved. But as I looked at her, all I could see was the betrayal, the years of deception. And suddenly, a terrible thought occurred to me. Does Sarah know? I asked, dreading the answer. The look on Mom's face told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, my baby sister, the one I'd protected and loved unconditionally, had no idea that we weren't fully related. In that moment, something inside me broke. The foundation of trust that our family was built on crumbled away, leaving nothing but a gaping chasm of hurt and betrayal. I stood up so quickly that my chair clattered to the floor. I can't do this, I said, my voice shaking. I can't be here right now. Amy, please, Mom begged, reaching for me, but I jerked away from her touch. Without another word, I ran from the kitchen, from the house, from the life I thought I knew. As I stumbled down the darkened street, tears blurring my vision, I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house of lies for another second. The cool night air stung my tear-stained cheeks as I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my identity, had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. I found myself at the park where Sarah and I used to play as kids. The rusty swing set creaked in the breeze, a haunting reminder of simpler times. I sank onto one of the swings, my body feeling heavier than ever before. As I sat there, Gently swaying back and forth, memories flooded my mind. Sarah's first steps, holding her hand on her first day of school, staying up late to help her with science projects. All those moments that had defined our relationship as sisters, were they built on a lie? My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket, no doubt my mom trying to reach me, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I even say? How could I face her, or Dad, or worst of all, Sarah? Sarah. My heart clenched at the thought of her. She was still sick, still in desperate need of a kidney. And now, because of this revelation, everything was so much more complicated. Would I still go through with the transplant? Could I? As the night wore on, I lost track of time. The anger that had propelled me out of the house began to fade, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I thought about all the times I'd felt like an outsider. In my own family, the way Mom seemed to favor Sarah, the unspoken tensions that I could never quite put my finger on. It all made a twisted kind of sense now. But even as I grappled with the betrayal, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah in the hospital, her face pale and drawn. Half-sister or not, she was still the little girl I'd sworn to protect. Could I really turn my back on her now, when she needed me most? As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I made a decision. I couldn't run away from this, no matter how much I wanted to. I had to face it head on, for Sarah's sake, if nothing else. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Amy, where are you? We've been worried sick." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm coming home, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk, all of us." As I hung up and began the long walk back, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. But I also knew that somewhere in the mess of lies and half-truths, there was still love. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to see us through. Top Patille. House loomed before me, no longer the safe haven it had once been. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, but before I could turn it, the door swung open. Dad stood there, his face a mask of worry and relief. "Amy," he breathed, pulling me into a tight hug. For a moment, I let myself sink into his embrace, pretending that everything was normal. But the illusion couldn't last. I pulled away, meeting his gaze. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "All of us, including Sarah." Dad's face fell, but he nodded. "You're right. It's time." As we walked into the living room, I saw Mom sitting on the couch, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. And there, looking small and confused, was Sarah. "Amy," she exclaimed, her face lighting up. "Where have you been? Are you okay?" The sight of her, so innocent and unaware of the bombshell about to drop, nearly broke me. But I steeled myself. She deserved the truth. "Sarah," I said gently, sitting next to her. "There's something we need to tell you. Something that's going to change everything." As Mom and Dad haltingly explained the situation, I watched the emotions play across Sarah's face, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a hurt so deep it was painful to witness. "So, we're not really sisters?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "We are sisters," I said fiercely. "Maybe not fully by blood, but in every way that matters." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But why didn't you tell me? All this time?" The accusation in her voice was like a knife to my heart. "I only found out last night," I admitted. "That's why I ran." As the full weight of the deception settled over us, the room fell into a heavy silence. Years of lies, of unspoken truths, hung in the air between us. Finally, Dad spoke up. "We thought we were protecting you both," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we were wrong. We should have been honest from the start." Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Can you ever forgive us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at Sarah, seeing the hurt and confusion in her eyes. Then, I turned to our parents, seeing the guilt and fear etched on their faces. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't going to come easily or quickly. Trust had been broken, and it would take time to rebuild. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I do know that we can't go back. We can only move forward." Sarah squeezed my hand, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this mess together. As the days turned into weeks, our family struggled to find a new normal. The initial shock of the revelation gave way to a tense, uneasy truce. Sarah and I threw ourselves into her treatment, focusing on her health as a way to avoid dealing with the emotional fallout. But the elephant in the room couldn't be ignored forever. One evening, as I sat by Sarah's hospital bed while she underwent dialysis, she finally broached the subject we'd both been avoiding. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly, her voice small and uncertain. I looked up from the book I'd been pretending to read, startled. "What? Of course not. Why would you think that?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm the reason for all of this. If I wasn't sick, if I didn't need a kidney—" "Stop," I said firmly, taking her hand. "None of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be sick, and you certainly didn't ask for the situation with Mom." She nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. "But things will never be the same between us, will they?" I sighed, searching for the right words. "They'll be different," I admitted, "but that doesn't mean they'll be worse. We're still sisters, Sarah. Nothing can change that." As I said the words, I realized how true they were. Despite the anger and hurt I felt towards our parents, my love for Sarah hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger in the face of adversity. "I'm still going to donate my kidney," I said, the decision crystallizing in that moment. "If you'll have it." Sarah's eyes widened. "Really? Even after everything?" I nodded, feeling more certain than I had in weeks. "You're my sister, half, whole, whatever. It doesn't matter. I love you, and I want you to be healthy." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she pulled me into a tight hug. "I love you too," she whispered. As we held each other, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but alongside them was a new determination. We would get through this, Sarah and I, together. The next few months were a whirlwind of medical appointments, tests, and preparations for the transplant surgery. Throughout it all, Sarah and I clung to each other, our bond growing stronger even as our relationship with our parents remained strained. Mom tried desperately to make amends, showering us with attention and apologies. But the trust that had been broken wasn't easily repaired. Dad, for his part, seemed lost, unsure of his place in our fractured family dynamic. The day of the surgery dawned bright and clear. As the nurses prepped me for the procedure, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was right. This was what family did for each other, regardless of blood ties. "Are you sure about this?" Mom asked for the 100th time, hovering anxiously by my bedside. I met her gaze steadily. "I'm sure," I said. "Sarah needs this, and I need to do it." As they wheeled me into the operating room, I caught a glimpse of Sarah being prepped in the room next door. Our eyes met, and I saw a mix of gratitude, love, and fear reflected in her gaze. I gave her a small nod, trying to convey all the words I couldn't say in that moment. Then the doors closed, and I was engulfed by the sterile, white world of the operating room. The next thing I knew, I was blinking awake in the recovery room, a dull ache in my side reminding me of what I'd just been through. As my vision cleared, I saw Dad sitting by my bedside, his face etched with worry and something else. Pride, maybe? "Hey, kiddo," he said softly, taking my hand. "You did great." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and scratchy. Dad quickly offered me some ice chips, which I gratefully accepted. "Sarah?" I managed to croak out after a moment. Dad's face broke into a relieved smile. "She's doing well. The surgery was a success." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, so intense it brought tears to my eyes. It had worked. I had helped save my sister. As the days passed and we both recovered, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The lies, the revelations, the pain, it had all led to this moment of healing, both physical and emotional. Sarah and I were moved to the same room as soon as we were both stable enough. Those quiet hours we spent together, sharing our fears and hopes for the future, brought us closer than we'd ever been before. One evening, as the setting sun cast a warm glow through the hospital window, Sarah turned to me with a serious expression. "Amy," she said softly, "I need you to know something. Even if we're not full sisters by blood, you'll always be my big sister in every way that matters. What you did for me, I can never repay that." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "You don't have to repay anything," I said. "That's what family does. We take care of each other." As we smiled at each other, I realized that the word family had taken on a new meaning for me. It wasn't about blood or DNA. It was about love, sacrifice, and the choices we make every day to stand by each other. The road to recovery was long and not always easy. There were setbacks and difficult days, both physically and emotionally. But through it all, Sarah and I leaned on each other, growing stronger together. Our relationship with our parents remained complicated. The trust that had been broken couldn't be mended overnight, and there were times when the weight of their deception threatened to overwhelm me. But slowly, gradually, we began to rebuild. Mom threw herself into caring for us during our recovery, her guilt manifesting in a flurry of activity. At first, I found her hovering, suffocating, a constant reminder of the lies that had torn our family apart. But as the weeks passed, I began to see the love and remorse behind her actions. One day, as she was helping me change my bandages, I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Mom?" I asked hesitantly. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, trying to compose herself. I can't believe how strong you both are. After everything we put you through, you still found it in your hearts to forgive us." I was silent for a moment, considering her words. "I'm not sure if I've fully forgiven you yet," I admitted. "But I'm trying. Because despite everything, I know you love us. Both of us." Mom nodded, wiping away her tears. "We do. More than anything in this world. And I promise you, Amy, no more secrets. No more lies. From now on, nothing but the truth between us." As I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity there. It would take time to fully trust again, but it was a start. Dad, for his part, struggled to find his place in our new family dynamic. The revelation of Sarah's true parentage had shaken his sense of identity as a father. But watching him with Sarah during her recovery, I saw the depth of his love for her. Biology be damned. One evening, I found him sitting alone on the porch, staring out into the darkness. "Hey," I said softly, sitting down beside him. He gave me a small smile. "Hey, yourself. How are you feeling?" I shrugged. "Getting stronger every day. How about you?" Dad was quiet for a long moment. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he finally said, "about what it means to be a father, a family." I waited, sensing he had more to say. "You know, when your mom first told me about Sarah, I was angry, hurt. I thought about walking away." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But then I held that little baby girl in my arms, and none of it mattered anymore. She was mine in every way that counted. I felt tears prick at my eyes. "You're a good dad," I said softly. "To both of us." He turned to me then, his eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you, Amy. What you did for your sister, it's the bravest thing I've ever seen." As we sat there in comfortable silence, I felt some of the lingering tension between us begin to dissipate. We still had a long way to go, but we were on the right path. As the weeks turned into months, life slowly began to return to a new kind of normal. Sarah's body accepted the kidney, and her health improved dramatically. Watching her regain her strength and vitality was like witnessing a miracle unfold before my eyes. I returned to college, throwing myself back into my studies with renewed vigor. My experience had given me a new perspective on life and what really mattered. I found myself drawn to classes in psychology and family counseling, fascinated by the complex dynamics that shape our closest relationships. Sarah, too, began to look towards the future with hope. As her health stabilized, she started making plans to return to school and pursue her dreams. We spent hours talking about our goals and aspirations, supporting each other in a way we never had before. Our parents worked hard to rebuild the trust they had broken. There were family therapy sessions, long, honest conversations, and a commitment to total transparency moving forward. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when the pain of the past threatened to overwhelm us. But slowly, gradually, we began to heal. One crisp autumn evening, almost a year to the day since that fateful night when our world had been turned upside down, our family gathered in the backyard for a barbecue. As I watched Sarah laugh at one of Dad's terrible jokes, her cheeks flushed with health and happiness, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Mom came to stand beside me, following my gaze. "She looks good, doesn't she?" she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Amy," Mom said, turning to face me, "I know we can never undo the hurt we caused you, but I want you to know how grateful we are for your forgiveness, your strength, your love. You saved this family in more ways than one." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "We saved each other," I said simply. As we rejoined the others, I realized that our family had been forged anew in the crucible of crisis. We had faced our darkest truths and come out stronger on the other side. The bonds between us, tested and strained almost to breaking, had ultimately proven unbreakable. Later that night, as Sarah and I sat on the porch swing, enjoying the cool evening air, she turned to me with a serious expression. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking a lot about what family really means." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. I think it's not about blood or DNA or any of that stuff," she said slowly. "It's about choice. It's about choosing to love someone, to stand by them no matter what. And you, Amy, you chose me, even when you didn't have to." I felt tears prick at my eyes as I pulled her into a tight hug. "I'll always choose you," I whispered fiercely. "You're my sister. Nothing will ever change that." As we held each other, I knew that whatever challenges life might throw our way, we would face them together. Our family had been broken, but in piecing it back together, we had created something stronger, more resilient, and infinitely more precious. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led us here, to a place of understanding, forgiveness, and unconditional love. And in the end, isn't that what family is really all about?